All right, let's get going. Welcome to the first and probably only meeting of the Rehabilitation Social Services Cannabis Subcommittee. And clerk will call the roll.
Senator Van Valkenburg. Here. Senator Rouse.
Here.
Senator Reeves. Here. Senator McDougall. Senator Surivel.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to lay out here how we're going to handle this today. We're likely going to have about a 180-page bill to vet, and we talked a little bit before the hearing about how to work through this in a meaningful way, and structured way. So, first of all, I just want to make clear what we're not going to talk about today. Number one, we're not going to talk about the tax rate. We're not going to talk about the revenue. We're not going to talk about where the revenue goes. That's for the Finance Committee. We're also not going to talk about the criminal provisions in the bill. All the criminal provisions are going to be talked about in the Courts of Justice Committee. So today, in the mission of this subcommittee of the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee is to talk about everything else. And so what we thought would make sense is to sort of break this hearing into pieces and to talk about these issues discreetly instead of trying to talk about everything at once and having a very wide-ranging discussion about a 180-page bill. So the first category of things I think we're going to talk about are the equity provisions. Well, first I'm going to let Senator Evans speak and explain his bill, and then let Senator Rouse speak and explain his bill. Then we have to decide which bill to move forward with. And then we will move into the equity provisions of the bill. We want to hear testimony, evidence, concerns, whatever about those issues. The second category of stuff we're going to talk about are the licenses, the types of licenses, the number of licenses. Then the third piece we're going to talk about is any of the regulations around the sale, manufacture, cultivation, manufacture, and sale. And then the last thing we'll talk about is enforcement, license enforcement, the non-criminal license enforcement issues. And then we will make a recommendation, hopefully send something out to the full committee, which will meet tomorrow, and then probably be heard in the Courts of Justice Committee. My guess is, if it has a favorable treatment, probably Wednesday of next week is my guess, because we have to get it to Finance by February 5th, I think. So that's the structure of the meeting. Just want to make sure everybody knows that, so they know how to sort of guide their testimony. So, any questions, committee? Got it, Bryce?
Drafted, sure.
Got it. All right. So first, I'm going to ask Senator Eben to come up and explain his bill, sort of overall broad view of his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is Senate Bill 423. What the bill does is establish a cannabis marketplace for adult use only in Virginia, and the bill represents the fastest path to a responsible regulated market this year. My bill prioritizes micro businesses and supports entrepreneurs, including those who were in over-policed communities and who fit into other criteria. We know that adult possession of cannabis has been legal in Virginia for 2.5 years now, and it's past time that adults 21 years and older can buy a safe, tested cannabis product regulated and taxed by the Commonwealth. We already have a very large cannabis market. Unfortunately, it's controlled by cartels and organized crime. According to New Frontier data, over the past few years, the illicit market has skyrocketed from an estimated $1.8 billion a year in 2021 to $2.4 billion per year in 2023. As I said, my bill is a relatively fast way to market, and I'll kind of go through the timeline briefly. As seen in lines 1179 to 1277, it allows for cultivation, processing, and retail sales by existing medical operators on July 1st, 2024. And they would, in exchange for that privilege, they would pay $1 million at least as a licensing fee, and they would be required to incubate 6 what we call micro businesses each, allowing entrepreneurs who want to get in the cannabis business to get valuable experience. And the $1 million that they pay in a licensing fee plus the taxes for the first 6 months or so would go exclusively to help small businesses that are, including disadvantaged businesses, have the working capital to enter the marketplace themselves. It would require the Cannabis Control Authority to promulgate regulations by November 1st of this year, lines 1137 to 1151. And then on January 1st, 2025, it would allow cultivation, processing, and retail sales by 60 micro businesses on lines 1207 to 1216. Then would allow for cultivation, processing, and retail sales by 5 industrial hemp processors. And there would also be an opt-out local referendum, which is described in lines 1292 to 1298. And finally, on July 1st, 2025, it would allow for a lot of other licenses. And I know that Senator Rouse can speak for himself, but his bill, the timeline's a little bit delayed, and he has some reasoning for that. But I feel like we should try and meet this demand outside of the black market as soon as possible, and with people we know can meet some demand. And in exchange for that privilege, they would incubate micro businesses and provide working capital for those same micro businesses. Thank you.
Great, Senator Evan, your bill also has, I guess, a cognate in the House at this time, right?
Yes, Delegate Paul Krizak has an identical bill in the House.
Got it. Okay. We seem to have lost Senator Van Valkenburg. Senator Reeves, have any questions? Senator Rouse, you can ask questions too if you want, but you're about to present, it looks like, so. Okay. All right. Thanks, Senator Evan. Senator Rouse, why don't you explain your bill?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to present this bill, my bill SB 448. Before I start, I just want to thank all the members, all the groups who had a hand in helping craft this bill, but also working on cannabis adult retail market for quite some time. And so, Mr. Chair, I think it's important that we acknowledge all the work that has gone into getting us to this place where we are today. As the members of the subcommittee know, in 2021, the General Assembly legalized growing, possession, consumption, and sharing of marijuana. However, the General Assembly failed to create a regulated adult use market to allow for the legal sale of marijuana. And since that time, we've seen a major expansion of marijuana on the black market, where unregulated, untested, unlabeled, and untaxed products are illegally sold, and oftentimes to minors. And we're hearing from law enforcement from Scott County to Virginia Beach that this is turning into a true public safety and public health crisis. But regardless of where you stand on the legalization of marijuana, we all can agree that we're never going to recriminalize marijuana. So therefore, it's up to us to finally create a well-regulated adult use market. Doing so will give adults safe access to this legal product, address existing public health and safety concerns, create jobs, and generate tax revenue. So SB 448 does all these things while ensuring that our adult use market is well regulated. It provides for opportunities for equal access. It does justice to communities ravaged by poverty and prior drug policy. It generates tax revenue and protects our communities. But one of the big distinctions between Senate Bill 423 and Senate Bill 448 is that it ensures fair participation. In this bill, no one applicant is preferred over another, and there are no head starts. SB 448 is the only option to prevent multi-state operators from monopolizing the market and ensure that all licensees have an equal and meaningful opportunity to participate in this market on day one. Now, we're going to have some common sense approaches to making this bill. But one of the major issues and major factor is allowing pharmaceuticals to get a head start on small businesses and those who are trying to create a true generational wealth, those who are trying to earn a living or even start a business. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, since we've seen what an unregulated cannabis market has done to Virginia, we cannot continue to let untested, unlicensed products fall into the wrong hands. And we cannot continue to eliminate opportunities for Virginians, again, to earn a living and have a true opportunity to partake in this market. And that essentially what SB 448 does, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rouse. Does Senator Van Valkenburg or Reeves, either of you have questions for Senator Rouse?
Mr. Chairman, question for council.
Okay, Senator Reeves.
David, does it have in here about the going to local referendum for those localities that don't want weed in their neighborhoods?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Senator Reeves, yeah, it does have a local referendum. I think
It's on
If you could just point me to the line.
22,
Oh, can I offer-
22, 23.
Do we offer the substitute?
22, 23.
Oh, I'd like to offer the
I'm
substitute.
sorry. Yeah, is there a
I'm
motion?
sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator Van Valkenburg moves, Senator Rouse seconds to adopt the substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
That's why I couldn't find it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank
All
you.
those
Sorry.
opposed? Okay, substitute's adopted.
all right, now I can
All
answer.
right. Now it's on 22 and 23. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so it's an opt-out referendum.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. May, I think Senator Evans looking for a copy if you have one. Yeah, hold on. Which one to adopt? Okay, so I think the first way we're going to handle this is which version to adopt. Does any of the members have any discussions for either of the patrons about that issue? Any questions? And then I want to take public testimony on that, and then I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
Can I just
Senator
point
Evans.
out one other difference between our bills? I believe that Senator Rouse's bill, I haven't read the substitute, allows for outdoor cultivation, and mine does not. Just a point of distinction.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, are there any questions for the patrons before we go to the public piece? Okay, so does anybody, member of the public, why don't we do we have time? Can you guys do timers, by the way?
Mr. Chair,
Can you do timers? Could you do 5 and 5?
and Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator Van Valkenburg.
and just maybe for clarification for me and maybe more so for the audience, we're going to take testimony on the top line differences between the bill and why they prefer that top line difference, not, the differences on line 2,475.
Correct. Right. So just so everybody's clear, we're going to talk about sort of which overall structure is best. And then after we adopt a structure, then we're going to get into those various categories I talked about earlier. So you don't need to focus your testimony on the super fine details, but sort of give us an idea of where you think which structure is best. So 5 and 5. Actually, there's no support or oppose. Why don't we take, let's say 10 minutes on which we should adopt, okay? If we get that far.
Yeah.
Just 10 overall, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. Hunter Jamerson, representing Jushi, the medical cannabis processor in Health Service Area 2. We are the medical cannabis provider in Northern Virginia and would like to first thank Senator Eben for carrying this effort now for the 4th year. I think we all owe him our thanks for championing this. He has been through all political mechanisms a stalwart champion of regulatory framework for adult use sales. And that's what I think is crucial here for the subcommittee to address. There is an illicit marketplace. It's happening actively as we speak. Senator Eben's bill, which Jushi supports, immediately launches a marketplace on July 1 to address that illicit marketplace. Senator Rouse's bill, which we respectfully oppose, does not. Senator Rouse's bill delays the launch of that marketplace until at least January 1st of 2025. And I'd like to address the criticisms of medical cannabis companies having a perceived head start. It's not a head start. It's what's necessary to launch an effective program. And 11 out of 12 states that have launched an adult use retail marketplace have recognized that fact. In 11 out of 12 states, the medical companies, the incumbents in the marketplace, have launched a retail marketplace at least 6 months early in order to provide a wholesale system for small businesses to sell at retail 6 months later and to immediately address with a quality, safety, tested, and state licensed product the illicit marketplace. That has worked in 11 out of 12 states. Senator Rouse's bill proposes to follow New York, the only state that has not launched the medical cannabis companies first. I don't need to tell you, I'm sure you've read it, New York is a mess. In New York, the states, the entities that have the licenses don't have product, they don't have financing. The entities that don't have the licenses are continuing to sell. Senator Evans' bill reflects the reality of what works to launch the marketplace. And most importantly, with the issue of fairness and competition, Senator Evans' bill provides not only a micro cannabis business program, but also provides a dedicated equity round for that licensing. It ensures fairness in competition for these licenses. There will be 450 retail licenses. The pharmaceutical processors hold, once fully built out, 30. There's no monopoly in 30 out of 450 licenses. We're in support of Senator Evans' bill. Ask you to consider its provisions.
Thank you, Mr. Jamerson. Keep on going.
Yep, thanks.
Mr. Habib.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Greg Habib from Gentry Lock. I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Cannabis Association. To respect your all's time, we actually asked our large membership not to come line up and individually tell you the same thing, that they support the bill. As you know, because you all have each worked very hard on this issue, Senator Rouse has crafted, with the help of many, many stakeholders across the aisle, across this building, across industries, a bill that creates a fair, safe, equitable market. We think this is the right approach. We very much appreciate the work Senator Eben and his supporters have done over the years. I will say nothing negative about Senator Eben's bill, his approach, or the time he has spent on this. We simply have some policy disagreements, and I think we see where the consensus is developing around the right way to do this. We appreciate that. I also do want to acknowledge, and this is one of the flaws in the legislative system, you all have gotten the substitute before this meeting, so you all have had a chance to review it. A lot of other people going to testify today have never seen the substitute. And it's not their fault. They just haven't had the opportunity because of the way the legislative process works. So you will hear opinions on a bill that, frankly, they haven't seen. And so that is not to disparage them. It's to acknowledge that people will hold opinions that may be contrary to where the facts lie today, but that's of no fault of their own. So we believe the substitute, which has gone through a lot of work over the last couple of weeks with a lot of your all's input, is the right way to do it. We appreciate your work on this, and we look forward to advancing Senator Rouse's bill and then working with Senator Eben as well to get the best marketplace we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Habib. All right.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Steve Hammond, Hammond Group Consulting. I'm here representing the VA Hemp Coalition. Each member has eloquently spoken to their bill, but we wanted to lend our support to Senator Rouse's, mainly because it advocates for small businesses, small hemp farmers, and we think that we would have a better chance to survive in that climate under his bill. So we thank you both for what you're doing, but we'd like to support Senator Rouse's bill. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. Halfway.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Philip Thompson, Cannabis Equity Consultants. Appreciate Senator Rouse and Senator Evans' bill. We're here in support of Senator Evans' bill because of the unique provisions that provide for helping minorities get into this market. We know that if you fire the starting line, put everybody on the starting line and fire the gun, we know who's going to win that race and we know who's going to lose that race. I've been here the last 3 years arguing about equity. We've worked with Senator Eben on this bill to put some provisions in the bill relating to the incubation program and some provisions that target some of the communities that have very well been hit hard by the war on drugs. And we hope that we can have these provisions included in, or hope that Senator Eben's bill moves forward. And we hope that whatever legislation comes out, these equity provisions are provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Senator Van
Real,
Valkenburg.
real quick, just because if other people are testifying on it, I want to have David May make one of his many world heroic contributions today. That's going to earn him a cocktail at the end of the day or something. Can you
Maybe a gummy in this committee.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe a gummy. Can you just, because I know the substitute has changed the language on equity, can you maybe do a very quick comparison of the two bills so that we make sure everyone's in the same space?
Yeah, because a lot of these folks can't see the version online. Yeah.
Sure. You just want a brief comparison of the equity
Yeah.
framework? Okay. So I'll start with Senate Bill 448.
Whose is that? You got to use names.
That would be Senator Rouse's bill.
Got it.
Senator Rouse's bill has criteria set out in 4.1-606B13, and I'll tell you what it is. I think these criteria are the same in both bills.
For those following at home, that's pages 17 and 18.
So what you're looking at there is deciding whether at least 66% of the company is owned by a person that is one of or more of five things. Resided 3 of the last 5 years in a historically economically disadvantaged community. Has attended for at least 5 years public school in a historically economically disadvantaged community. Received a Pell Grant or attended for at least 2 years institution of higher education, at which 30% of the students are eligible for the Pell Grant. Is a veteran or is a hemp processor or grower. So relevant to that would be what is a historically economically disadvantaged community. We define that in 4.1-600, and it's basically a cross-reference. We just cross-reference an existing definition, which I think is in the Clean Air Act in section 56-576. And the long and short of it is historically economically disadvantaged community would be a community that's basically of low income or that a majority of the population are people of color. And then you can flip to 4.1-1000, which would be on page 46. And in subsection B, we direct the board to require on its applications that applicants give enough information to determine whether they meet that criteria. And then we direct the board to consider that criteria when they are granting the licenses. Now, Senate Bill 423, let me get to that. Like I said, Senate Bill 423 has the same substantive criteria for who would qualify. Senate Bill 423 refers to them as micro licensees. Senate Bill 423 also has some additional provisions as far as what happens in the event that you meet one of these criteria. So if you look down at 606B15, it directs the board for applicants that meet the criteria set forth in B13 to establish standards and requirements, including any preference in the licensing process for these applicants, what percentage of possible we will waive of their license fees, and also a waiver of any requirement for these applicants that you would have to show a certain amount of proof of funds or that you've already secured a property for the licensed premises. So it basically just kind of gets rid of some of the capital requirements that are barriers to entry. And there are also equity provisions built in to the transitional sales enactment, which is at the very end of Senate Bill 423. So you'd be looking at enactment number 6. And through that enactment, which is the enactment that would allow pharmaceutical processors to begin sales on July 1st, 2024, they would have a business accelerator program. It's basically an incubation program. They would each incubate, I think it was 5 or 6 companies apiece for a total of 30. They would be independent of the pharmaceutical processor, and basically they would help get them going with the goal of those companies. And again, they would have to meet that criteria I read out with the goal of those companies beginning sales on January 1st, 2025. We would also release at that time 30 other companies to begin sales or operations on January 1st, 2025, who not necessarily participated in the incubation program, but did meet that criteria that we have in B13 of 4.1-606. So there are a few other things, but that's kind of an overview and comparison of the equity provisions of the bill.
All right, thank you, Mr. May. Thank you, Senator Van Valkenburg. It's probably helpful for everybody. We're getting a lot of testimony about that. Let's keep the clock going, and you can come on up.
Good morning. My name is Lonnie Hayes. I'm a kinesiologist in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Honorable members of the Senate Cannabis Subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to address today regarding the crucial matter, Senate Bill 423, as we look forward to the development of the cannabis industry. In our great state, it's important to pave the way for a diverse and inclusive marketplace that will benefit all Virginians. I stand before you not as an advocate, but as a passionate believer in the potential for positive change that this bill represents. The provisions that Senate Bill 423 seeks to implement, as opposed to Senate Bill 448, the building blocks that will define the character of our cannabis industry and determine who gets a chance to participate and thrive, I feel that these matters are not just a choice but a necessity. I myself would like to be a part of the industry. Firstly, the incubation program envisioned in this bill is a lifeline for small and minority businesses. It can provide the necessary support, mentorship, resources for them to navigate the cannabis industry. By fostering an environment of collaboration and shared knowledge, this program becomes the catalyst for innovation, ensuring that our cannabis industry is dynamic, inclusive, and responsive to the needs of all. Secondly, if financial funding is targeted at small businesses, it can become an investment in economic empowerment for marginalized communities. It will potentially level the playing field, given those who have historically faced barriers and opportunity to flourish in the cannabis industry. The financial support is not just about business, it is about fostering economic equity and social justice. Lastly, real estate and fee waivers, as opposed by this bill, can help alleviate the burdens on prospective licensees. Entry into the industry can be cost prohibitive, and these waivers ensure that financial constraints do not stifle the growth of those who are often overlooked. Let us dismantle systemic barriers. Supporting Senate Bill 423 will champion a vision of an inclusive and equitable cannabis industry. You are paving the way for a marketplace that reflects a rich diversity of our Commonwealth. By supporting this bill, you send a powerful message that Virginia is committed to creating opportunities for all, irrespective of background or circumstance. In conclusion, I urge each member of this esteemed subcommittee to lend their support to Senate Bill 423. Let's be at the forefront of progressive cannabis policy that is not only economically robust, but socially responsible. Thank you for your time, and I trust that your decision will be guided by the principles of justice, equity, and the collective well-being of our diverse community. Thank you.
Great. Sir, come on up, yeah. No, next up. You're good. So no, we have a minute and 30 seconds left. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 8 people left, which maybe we'll put another 5 minutes on the timer, but I'm just encouraging everybody. We're going to get into the details of the equity. We're going to get into the details of the licensing, all that stuff next. We're just trying to figure out which overall bill to adopt as our working structure before we move forward to those discussions. So if everybody could just focus their comments on whether we should go with the Rouse model or the Evan model as an overall model. And then if people like, for example, the Eben equity, they want to put the Eben equity in the Rouse bill or the Rouse equity in the Eben bill, we can talk about that next. So just keep that in mind in terms of your testimony, because we need to keep this hearing moving. We're going to be here till 3 o'clock. So go ahead, sir.
Good morning, sir. My name is Clifton Coger. I am also a licensed hemp grower in the state of Virginia. I also had the distinct pleasure of participating in a multi-state as far as New Jersey, Maryland, currently D.C. One of the things that I've learned through going through those processes is how to equitably, do the licenses. Like, for instance, in Virginia, there's approximately 139 cities and states. In New Jersey, they allow those cities and states to either opt out if they do not wish to participate. I think that's important to know if a county does not want that in their county, that they have the opportunity to opt out. I'm in support of, obviously, SB Evans' bill, because it does allow for the micro growers. A lot of these on the East Coast at least, allow small businesses and owners to get into the process in order to get into, allow them to speak and get delivered. That was my, I didn't get 5
Yeah,
minutes.
hey, Jillian, I said we can add another 5 minutes to it, so, yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you don't have 5 minutes. Everybody behind you has 5 minutes.
Okay. Oh, because I thought I took up his time, and then I'll get.
No, you don't get.
Okay. Again, I'm in support of Everett's bill because it does allow for the micro grows in order to flourish in that arena. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jesse Frierson, and I represent the East Coast Cannabis as well as the Richmond Crusade for Voters. And we stand here in support of Senator Evans' bill. All respect to Senator Ross as well. We feel that Senator Evans' bill would do a great deal in terms of getting a lot more people involved, particularly persons who are from impacted communities. And we urge you all to support SB 423. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, J.M. Padini on behalf of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in support of Senator Evans' bill because it most immediately provides opportunity for consumers to purchase at a legal and regulated source. It also does not create, intentionally or otherwise, new penalties for legal personal possession in public. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Chelsea Higgs-Wise, and I'm with Marijuana Justice. I'm here to support Senator Rouse's bill. The main pieces are because the micro pieces in Evans' bill are not guaranteed to go to minorities or those impacted. They could all go to veterans. There is absolutely no guarantee that January 1, the accelerators would be operational. There's also no penalties to the pharmaceutical operators for not having them operational. There has been not one incubation program in the country to work. So thinking that this is the program and opportunity for people impacted, that is a lie. And the referendum piece to allowing them to start would actually create a monopoly in those areas because it would give them the exception. I brought page 38 of the Minority Cannabis Business Association report that's titled Inequities in Existing Medical Markets Create Inequities in Adult Use Markets. These non-guarantees that are in this bill that seem really good have been pulling us by the blind side across the country, and we've been getting duped. And this report came out and showed that those 13 states that went first are now, it's only working for the big guys and not the little ones. And for those reasons, we support Senator Rouse's bill.
Hey y'all, good morning. My name is Kalia Harris. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Student Power Network and a part of the Cannabis Justice Coalition. We are in support of Rouse's bill over Evans' bill. It gives a fair and even playing field for everyone, including communities most impacted by marijuana enforcement on day one of legalization. And it also includes outdoor growing. So for those reasons, we will support it. Thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Good day. My name's Barbara Biddle. I come to you as a representative of small businesses operating in the retail sector of the hemp industry. As it relates to preferences and structure, my support leans towards Senator Rouse's bill. While I appreciate Senator Evans' intent to foster competition among small businesses, my apprehension arises from the existing framework surrounding licensing, from the stringent licensing requirements to the limitations on canopy sizes and imposed caps on sales and manufacturing. The current structure threatens to stifle the growth of small operators in the emerging recreational market.
Thank you. Good morning. Got a new hat.
I know. Thank you, Chairman. CJ Jordan, small business owner, Virginia Hemp Coalition. This morning, I am speaking in support of Senator Rouse's bill. We love you, Senator Evans, for all the work that you've done over the years. However, for someone who has spent a great deal of her adult life advocating on behalf of minority-owned businesses, service-disabled-owned businesses, and working at the Department of Commerce, I have seen firsthand how large-owned businesses squash the opportunity of their small partners when we talk about equity. And I'm not going to go into equity because that's another conversation. But when you look at the rules and regulations that the federal government has in place, even when you say 7% of small business participation, those large businesses know how to not adhere to those rules and regulations on a federal level. So now we're talking about a state level. And therefore, sir, we support what you are doing. We, as those are SMEs that really work with minority-owned businesses and service-disabled-owned businesses, we want to work more closely with you. But more importantly, we would like for also, when we talk about a referendum, we want to make sure that our farmers are not excluded when folks are not educated between intoxicated marijuana and non-intoxicated cannabis. So there's opportunities for industrial hemp. So please consider that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Wow. We got the time estimate right down to the second. Okay. Any further discussion by the committee members? Senator Van Valkenburg, you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. For council, David, can you just, I think it'd be helpful as a baseline if you could maybe hit the high notes on the difference between the introduced and substituted Rouse bill for everybody, just to help kind of point people in the right direction.
Mr. Chair, Senator Van Valkenburg. Yeah, we can do that. So it looks a lot different because it's a lot shorter, but we got a little creative to make some of that happen. So I'll go through the substantive differences, but it's not all that different. All right. Number one, we put in the language that models the Maryland sort of social equity criteria that we went through earlier. That's their first change. And then put in that language about the board considering that criteria and requiring information regarding that criteria on a license application. We also removed provisions that were in the introduced version that would have transferred much of the regulation of our current hemp program from VDACs to the CCA. Basically what that schematic looked like was hemp would go over to the CCA for testing. They'd be subject to labeling and packaging requirements under the CCA, and if everything checked out and they had low enough THC to still be considered hemp, then they would go on back to VDACs and be regulated there. We took that out. So now hemp just stays where it is underneath VDACs and nothing changes. We removed a lot of provisions related to like administrative provisions for the CCA. This could be done in a different bill. This enabled us to shorten the bill substantially. We restored and modified certain language in 4.1-604 that basically enables the existence or the continued existence of a minority and small business liaison and team at the CCA. We restored the provisions of the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Board and Fund. We added a APA exemption for the CCA's initial adoption of regulations to implement the provisions of the bill to account for the timeline. If they're going to get close to meeting the timeline of the bill, they really needed that APA exemption. We deleted some unnecessary kind of holdover language that we found from prior versions, like the definition of canopy that we didn't need, just technical kind of cleanup. We deleted language that would prohibit or allow the board to not issue a license if more than 10% of the company was owned by a non-resident of Virginia. I had some constitutional concerns with that language. Let's see, we direct the CCA to promulgate regulations regarding their suspension and revocation processes. There's a lot of language in the bill that allows the board to suspend and revoke in certain circumstances, but doesn't require it. And while we wanted to retain that language because we don't think a one-size-fits-all approach works for suspensions and revocations, we want the board to have some sort of structure so it can't arbitrarily invoke these rules. So there was some language initially that currently appears in the code that limits the square footage of a retail marijuana store to 1,500 square feet. We changed that, so we took out the 1,500 square feet limitation, acknowledging that we don't know if that's the magic number or not, but we did allow language in there for the board to limit the square footage of the store. So presumably there will be some limitation, but we just took out the language that says 1,500 is that magic number. And then we removed some language about immunity for a licensee for the acts of its employee. There was some conflicting information in one place that said you can't be held liable for what your employee does as a licensee, and there was some language that says you could be held liable. So we took out the language that says that you can't be held liable. And those are the main changes between the original bill and the substitute.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. May. And Mr. May, just really quick, can you reiterate for us again where the definition for economically disadvantaged community comes from and where it is in the bill? Or, well, you don't need to tell me where it is in the bill because we have two bills in front of us, but.
Yeah, it's in 4.1-600. It's a cross-reference to
4.1-600, I think he's 600.
Should be right towards the beginning of the substitute. Yeah, page 4. So it's a cross-reference there to, we have the same definition in the Clean Air Act in section 56-576.
Sorry, slow down. Same definition in the Federal Clean Air Act or this?
Clean Economy Act. That's what I said the first time.
Okay, it's about to say. Okay.
Hold on.
Virginia Clean Economy, VCEA. Yeah, hold on, we're getting there.
And I'll read you that definition. Historically, economically disadvantaged community means Romanet 1, a community in which a majority of the population are people of color, or Romanet 2, a low-income geographic area.
And that's an or. And low-income geographic area is?
I think that ultimately, well, we got low, yeah, okay. Low-income geographic area means any locality or community within a locality that has a median household income that is not greater than 80% of the local median household income, or any area in the Commonwealth designated as a qualified opportunity zone by the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury via his delegation of authority to the IRS.
Okay, so 80% of the median income of the locality or designated as an opportunity zone. Right? Okay, all right.
Is that in the Rouse substitute?
Choose your mic.
That's in the Rouse substitute? What line is that?
Mr. Chair, Senator McDougal, so the definition to HEDC is on lines 94 to 95, and then you've got the cross-reference there to 56-576. So I was reading the language from section 56-576, where that cross-reference.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, our lines aren't lining up with your lines. Did you have somebody print that?
Yeah. So
What?
maybe they got an old version.
Yeah, anybody got an old version?
And 95, and then
95 is licensed and 94 is industrial hemp extract.
yeah, that's what 99 was.
Oh, they're 89 and 90. 89, 90. Historically.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, the version on LIS, it's on lines 94, 95, page 4.
You got it, Sarah? You're still going
Y'all
there?
keep talking. I'll work.
Okay. All right. So, is there any further discussion? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I will move to, let me get my bills right. I will move to roll Bill 432 into Bill 448, and I'd like to speak to that motion.
All right. Senator Van Valkenburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll echo what other people have said about Senator Evans' work on this. and I'll just note three reasons for making this motion and using 448 as the vehicle. I think two that are substantive, one that is maybe a little bit more about the process. One is I'm not very comfortable with the Head Start. I think we can have a process where everybody starts at the same time and make it work. Two, I'm much more comfortable with the public health framework in the Rouse bill, which anybody that's heard me speak about this in the past knows is kind of my main issue. And I recognize that can be hashed out in any bill, but just as a starting point. And I think third, and maybe almost most importantly in some ways, is we're going to have a bill come over from the House that is probably going to look a lot like Senator Evans' bill. And I think as a way to continue to have conversation and make sure everybody's crossing T's and dotting I's and getting eyes on it, I think it's probably valuable to have two different vehicles moving in the opposite direction, moving across the Capitol. And so I would move to roll 432 into 448.
Okay, Senator Evans, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I think I know what's going to happen, but I just wanted to point out three distinctions, and one that I didn't mention. I know you said you want to talk about taxes, but I think substantively the fact that my bill invests $15 to $20 million in tax revenue into equity startups is an important point. And on the terms of the issue of letting medical go first, my bill follows what's an example of what's worked in 11 states. The other model was attempted in New York and didn't succeed. And I don't see finance mechanisms in SB 448 to help people with equity. We can protect the public from the dangers of the black market of cannabis starting on July 1st, or we can wait longer. And whichever way, we've waited for years. But for public health, I think that my bill does make that difference. And the last thing I want to say is I want to thank David May, because there's been 7 versions of this SB 423, trimming it down from 400 pages last year down to 22 pages. So appreciate all his work on the interim over that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Evans. I think this is like my 5th or 6th cannabis hearing bill or something. I think this thing has gone through so many iterations, and every bill is a book. So Mr. May has become quite an author through this process over the last 3 years.
Well, we've got a paperback version now.
Yeah. So is there any further discussion? No? Where'd Rouse go? Oh, there he is. Okay. Anything you want to say, Senator? That's why he took off. Okay.
Yeah, I'm right here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. I want to thank Senator Edmond as well. I think as I started off my comments today, I wanted to note all the work that has gone into trying to bring an adult use marijuana market to Virginia. And so I want to continue to say, as someone who grew up in an historical disadvantaged community, someone who has a parent who is incarcerated as well, someone who understands being a minority and trying to operate a small business, being able to have a true opportunity to develop that business and not being swamped down by a big business. And that is no knock to pharmaceutical companies. But Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, what this is about is giving the small guys, the little guys, an opportunity to fulfill a dream of owning a business that can create wealth, a true opportunity to be in a marketplace where they are recognized as such and not having to be under the guise of a larger company and battling them along the way just to make ends meet. So again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and members today in the audience, I would not have my name on a bill or bring a bill forward if it did not have a social equity component to it that ensures that those who have been historically disadvantaged or over criminalized did not have an opportunity to partake in this new market. This is about leveling the playing field and ensuring that when this market steps up, everybody has a fair shot at a free market. Thank you, Mr.
All right, thank you, Senator Rouse. So at this point, any further discussion? Any committee members? Okay, so we need to vote on the motion to incorporate Eben into Rouse and list both of the Senator Rouse and Eben as the chief patrons of the bill, co-chief patrons of the bill. Okay, clerk will call the roll. Well, actually, are you gonna oppose that motion? Okay, all those in favor of incorporating, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Senator Reeves votes aye by proxy. Okay, so we're going to work with the Rouse vehicle, but that doesn't mean we can't take pieces of Eben and stick it in or modify or whatever. So that's where we are right now. So the first piece we want to talk about is the equity provisions. My understanding, Mr. May, is that the equity provisions of the bill are on pages 17 through 18 and page 46. So, Senator Rouse, why don't you go first, explain your equity provisions, and then, I don't know if Senator Eben, you want to explain yours or something, I guess, and then we can take testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On addressing social equity, this bill provides that the CCA to establish criteria for identifying applicants that live in or went to public school in a historically economically disadvantaged community, received the Pell Grant, went to college where at least 20% of the students received the Pell Grant, whether are veterans or are registered hemp cultivators or processors, in addition to waiving all or part of the license fees for SWAM businesses, service disabled veterans, and businesses located in an historically economically disadvantaged community. The CCA is also required to report annually on its efforts to promote diversity and ownership, and also have an expert witness here, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Senator McDougal.
Mr. Chairman, what would be helpful for me is if we can step through and say what areas qualify for each of these things. So if I understand correctly now, the definition of historically economic disadvantaged community is in Code Section 56576, 5 years, so we know what that means. Little 2, 5 years at a public elementary or secondary school located in one of those communities. So get that. Received a Pell Grant. Who qualifies for Pell Grant? And so number 1, and can you receive a Pell Grant and be at a community college? So that's one question. And then the second is what institutions in Virginia, at least, meet the second qualification, have at least 30% of the students who are eligible for Pell Grants. So if we could have what specifically those are.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator McDougal, thank you. Some of those things I'm able to answer off the top of my head. Many of them I am not. The historically economically disadvantaged jurisdictions, remember that comes from the Clean Economy Act. That actually incorporates then 2 sub-definitions, majority people of color. Those are just based on census data. We have that list of jurisdictions. And then the historically economically disadvantaged. When we went through the Clean Economy Act and then beginning to develop this legislation, the former category obviously picks up a lot of our urban centers in Virginia, and it is in some ways a proxy also, you see, sadly, for some of the over-policed jurisdictions we've heard talk about. The other half of the definition, the one based on income, tends to be our rural parts of Virginia, a lot of Southwest and South Side Virginia. Again, there are lists of that. I just don't have that here in front of me.
Mr. Chairman, I'm looking for what is the qualification for Pell Grant? 1, 2, does that include community colleges? And 3, what is the list of universities or colleges in Virginia that have 30% of the students on average eligible for Pell Grant? I need those 3 things.
Yep. Well, I'm going to have to get you the list of the definitions for who qualifies under the federal Pell Grant standards as they sit today. As my understanding, the qualification of that would hit most of the HBCUs in Virginia.
And I would say that the Pell Grant criteria, I'm looking it up right now, is complicated. I mean,
it's a very complicated formula. It's based on parents' income and lots of other factors.
Looking at Chev, if you look at the Chev data for percentage,
Senator Van Valkenburg.
I'm sorry, thank you. The number's 30%, right? 30%, right? So George Mason's at 31%, Norfolk's at 65, Old Dominion's at 40, Radford's at 37, University of Virginia at Wise 38, VCU 31, Virginia State 70. So it hits a decent number of the 4 years.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
So, all right, and in that little I, are we using Chev data, or is there another place? Maybe that's a question for Mr. May. The way it's written, would that 30% of the students on average are eligible for Pell? Are we taking that list from what Chev produces, or what some other entity produces?
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if you look on page 46, that's where the CCA is directed to establish in their applications guidelines to include these factors in there. So the CCA would have to have in the application, you would have to then certify where you went, and the CCA would determine then the eligibility, which I'm sure would use Chev's data.
Right, or maybe as part of the regs, they'd have some
Correct.
clarification on that.
And of course, it can change. You heard one of those universities is 31%. That could change over time.
Right. Okay. Senator McDougal.
Mr. Chairman, so that's another question. So what if somebody starts the application process from a institution that's at 30%, and during the process before they approved, the institution's at 29? Or after their license is approved, the institution dips, do they lose their license?
Mr. Beebe, I assume that would come out in the regs, or we're talking,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, but I would also say it says has attended a university, and so I think you would look at the time they attended the university. Did it meet that criteria? But that would be subject to the regs that CCA issued. So, Mr. Chairman,
unless we put tighter language in the statute, right? Correct. Yeah.
Right, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, sort of at a high
Mr.
level,
Beebe, yeah.
In addition to the specific sort of equity provisions that have been highlighted, and we can highlight them some more, really this bill does equity in other ways. For example, it has greater license access. We have lower barriers to entry by having lower tiers of cultivation, for example, that might have lower barriers to entry. There are fee waiver eligibilities built into this. There's the equal start date. There's the criteria. We also do things like changing the possession standard and you can get it from 1 ounce to 2.5 ounces. All of these things are things that do equity. And then we have the specific equity provisions that you've already talked about on page 17, 18, and then on page 46. Okay. So we can go into those as deeply as you would like to.
Okay. So, Senator Eben, did you have anything you wanted to say about equity?
I just noticed, and I don't know what page it's on in the substitute, there is a preference for registered hemp processors and growers in the licensure, but I don't know what page that's on. I'm trying to relocate it.
Mr. Chair, that's
Senator
line 456 to 458,
Thank
so that's
you.
page 18.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, just to put a point on that, it's very tightly drafted. It's not all registered hemp processing growers. They have to have been registered prior to January 1st, 2021, which is important. It means they entered the market early, and they still have to be registered. So these are people who have committed early to the market and stayed in the market.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
Just some of this language, me personally, I'd feel more comfortable if it was tighter. For example, a veteran of the armed forces, no requirement that they be honorably discharged from as a veteran, and maybe that's not the intent, but some of those items probably ought to.
So you offer a friendly amendment to add honorably discharged?
Mr. Chairman, I certainly would, but as we're looking at all these things, and maybe it's the intent to leave a lot of that to another body to decide, but if the criteria seems to be one that we're trying to make sure individual groups or individual areas are included, some of them we ought to tighten up, in my opinion.
Okay, so you want to make that motion on that? Okay, so in line 456, after the United States, I think Senator McDougal is moving that it's a not dishonorably discharged.
So,
is there a second? What?
So in the fee waiver section, we refer to service disabled veterans. Here we refer to veterans. So it's obviously a policy decision. Should it be any veteran, honorably discharged, service disabled? That's for you all to make. But there are other references in there where we've had tighter language.
Okay. So, well, Senator McDougal moves to make that amendment in those places. Mr. What?
Well, Mr. Chair, how many other sections does it reference?
I think it's just the two. If you look on page 48 in the waiver section, one of the categories that CCA can waive their license fees are service-disabled veterans, as defined in 2.24310, and then here it just refers to veterans.
Okay, that's categorically. I think that's categorically different. So yeah. Okay.
Okay, so Mr. May, on line, I think the motion is on line 46 to say and was not dishonorably discharged after United States. Senator McDougall moves. I'll second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Oh, the Uber chair has arrived. Hello, Senator Favola.
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm a member of the committee emeritus since I am the chair of the
No, you are.
full committee.
You are. I just didn't notice you were sitting there until you heard your voice. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so that's been amended. Before we get to the public testimony, any other comments about social equity from the patrons? No. Okay. Can we set the timer at 5 and 5? Anybody have anything they want to say for the social equity or against the social equity?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
one other thing, and
Okay,
I'm
before we
just
go
trying
there.
to process it on that little triple I. Is there reason we wouldn't want to encourage people who only have a certificate, so might not have a 2-year degree, to be able to be eligible as well? I mean, I think one of the things I continue to hear is we need to make it easier for people to enter the workforce, and having more certificates, we're certainly pushing our community colleges in that degree, in that direction. So I would suggest that you would leave the same language in there, but have received a certificate or 2 years of a college, or received a certificate from or attended at least 2 years of a college or university.
Okay, Mr. May. I know you're not an education lawyer, but do you know if there's something in the code we can cross-reference for that to provide clarity? Or I'm sure CCA could figure regs out for that too, but do you know?
Mr. Chair, I guess I would just want to clarify the intent there is if you say certificate or 2 years, are you trying to require a certificate, like they actually completed some sort of program within those 2 years, or what is the?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that at a number of our community colleges, some of the certificate programs are less than 2 years. So you could go and get a HVAC or welding or some other trade or skill certificate, but it might not be 2 years at that institution.
Senator Van Valkenburg.
So I understand what the senator's getting at, but I think the idea of that section is that the Pell Grant is showing that you yourself came from a disadvantaged circumstance, right? Or you were of a certain income set. I mean, could Jeff Bezos' son get a credit at J. Sarge Reynolds and then get an equity license under that language? Because that's against the purpose of the equity license.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator McDougall.
I'm not trying to eliminate the Pell Grant part. I'm trying to say if you had a Pell Grant, you might not have gone to 2 years. Could you have gotten a Pell Grant and completed a certificate and it be less than 2 years? And maybe that's not possible under the Pell Grant provision. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So are we ready to take social? Senator Evan.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to Senator McDougall, it says that they have received a Pell Grant. Can you not receive a Pell Grant for less than 2 years? And the way I read this, it says have received a federal Pell Grant or attended for at least 2 years an institution which there's 30% get a Pell Grant. So you wanted that they got a Pell Grant themselves or that they attended it for a shorter time?
Senator McDougall.
Mr. Chairman, and it could be differing views, but it seems to me we're trying to, a lot of individuals who might not be able to go through a 4-year institution, but they could be going to the institutions, particularly our community colleges, and receive certificates which are equally valuable, and those individuals would not be included in this unless they had the Pell Grant. But they could go somewhere that would have been eligible if they'd gone for a longer period of time. And,
I understand.
and that might not be the desire of the committee, but I certainly hear that in my area, that we want to make it easier for those students to succeed and try not to eliminate them.
Okay, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think as it reads, it says if you just got the Pell Grant, right? So therefore it would cover anybody that just got the Pell Grant, regardless of how
So
they used it.
Here's what I want to do on the testimony. If there's anybody that doesn't like the equity provisions or has criticism or thinks it ought to change, Wani will go 5 minutes, okay? Jillian, you got that? Okay. So if you don't like it, you think it ought to change, let us know how you think it ought to be changed.
You guys just, Philip Thompson again, you just spent 5 minutes arguing about people who have sort of succeeded in society, got a degree or got a Pell Grant, went to college. What about the kind of people that have dropped out of school, became caught a misdemeanor case for marijuana, and now they've got that arrest and conviction, but still have turned their lives around and want to get involved? What are you doing for them? You know, we're looking at the people who won. We're looking at hemp producers that are out there that are in the process. What about the people who have turned their lives around? You're seemingly forgetting about them, who've been impacted by the enforcement of marijuana. You say lived in an area. A whole bunch of people can live in an area, but they're not the people that actually got stopped by the police for having smell and then something else come up. You got to start thinking about these people. You can't leave these people out of this bill. Somehow you've got to bring them in. Secondarily, I'd hope that you would look at the hub zone for designating areas. Hub zones are not only in urban areas, there are a lot of rural areas that are under the hub zone language. And I think that would be more inclusive than the areas that have been criminally enforced. So I hope you would look at that. And don't forget about the people who've turned their lives around, want to get involved in this business. They need help. Some of those people need to learn how to do business and get in this process. So I hope you don't forget these people. There are quite a few people that have not lived in an economically disadvantaged community but have been overly policed. You know, there's people that, you know, haven't graduated, haven't got a Pell Grant. You know, we've got to look at some of these people and make sure that the criteria isn't just where you live. The criteria is, have you been impacted? Because we're definitely looking at the impact on the hemp producers, you know, and how they're being left out.
Thanks. Batter up.
Thank you. Good morning, Senators, Mr. Chair. I just want to start by thanking both sponsors for their work on these bills, and glad that we're here again talking about adult use. My name is Nigas Tabebi. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy at Columbia Care. We are the medical cannabis licensee for Hampton Roads and Central Virginia. I wanted to come up and speak on the equity piece because I do think that medical operators and incumbents have a role to play in supporting small businesses that are entering the market. And I'd like to provide an example. I apologize, I don't have enough copies for everyone today, but I have a press release from a partnership that started in New Jersey. And I think it's a really good example of how incumbent operators can support and help new operators entering the market. In this instance, we worked with Martha Figueroa from Butter Cake, and she was an experienced pastry chef and a legacy cannabis operator. She is pursuing her manufacturing license in New Jersey and is on her way to operationalizing that license. But in the meantime, she needed cash because there's a long period between when you have begun the license and when you actually start generating cash flow and revenue. And it's very difficult to access investment capital in cannabis, no matter who you are. And when you add being a small woman minority-owned business, it gets much more difficult. We met up with her and we started working with her to bring her products to Delaware because that was where we could do it first. We ran a limited run batch of her special edibles, wonderful infused peanut butter brownies that were immensely successful in Delaware. And that gave her an immediate cash infusion that kept her business alive. We then worked with her to navigate compliance process and regulatory approvals in New Jersey, her home state where she's looking to operationalize. And we've been able to successfully bring her multiple products of hers to market, which has helped her establish her brand before she's begun operations. It's helped her generate revenue.
Senator Rouse.
Thank you. Just I have a question for you. This sounds like success story as well. Is there anything prevent you from continuing that work?
There would be some challenges without an incubator program. We have
No.
more
I'm not asking about an
advantages.
incubator program. I'm asking about your company.
Rouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that.
We're absolutely able to continue
Well, let
doing
me
that,
finish my
but we-
question, ma'am. Is
we
there
absolutely can
let me
continue
finish
to
my
do that.
question, ma'am. Is there anything preventing Columbia Care from still incubating and helping small SWAM businesses and disabled veteran-owned business step up their business?
We can and we will continue to.
Thank
We're
you.
not required to do so in New Jersey. But I have heard lots of comments today about how medical operators are only a force for negativity in this market. And I think it's important that we recognize that the market structure was not designed by the companies that operate in it, but it was designed by policy. And we look forward to being part of a functional, inclusive market that works for everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. All right, Ms. Higgs-Wise.
Hello, thanks again. I just want to come up and also speak to the definition of equity that I think a lot of people are speaking about, which are directly impacted people. So I wanted to again bring the idea of an impacted license that would not just be folks with misdemeanor convictions, but also veterans that were impacted by marijuana prohibition while they were in active duty. I completely understand the honorably discharged, but there are many veterans that were also impacted by this marijuana prohibition that I think that should also be included in this type of impact license. I agree that absolutely we should have money, time, and training to go straight to these types of impacted folks and make sure that we have some sort of startup capital, which I know we've talked to Senator Rouse about. And I just also want to just continue to say that we do need some type of protections around MSOs and multi-state operators, and I watch these things closely across the country, and New Jersey is not being held by MSOs, only on a one-on-one basis. So just wanted to also mention that. Thank you.
Okay. So I again underestimated the time, I think. So why don't we add another 5 minutes, Jillian, and then come on up. Three? I only got.
Yes, I am a victim of the cannabis prohibition. Grew up in an economically disadvantaged area in New York. Luckily, my parents were able to move me out into Fredericksburg, Virginia. And as an adult, being diagnosed with PTSD from the experiences and growing up in New York, I graduated from George Mason University, so I'm borderline in that 30%, so I might be excluded, so please don't forget about those who are victims of the cannabis prohibition. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello again, Chair. First, I want to speak against the HUB zone. If you understand HUB zone, the federal law requires that 33% of your employees live in that zone. I think the model going forward is to look at enterprise zones and the opportunity investment zones, because that takes care of urban and rural and might be a better model than just using Pell and Chef.
Thank you.
Good, I almost said afternoon, wishful thinking. Morning, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kayla Mock. I'm with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, Local 400. We just wanted to align our comments with Marijuana Justice and Ms. Higgs-Wise. I am here to speak on workers' rights issues, which we clearly feel is an equity issue, but I will save that for licensing. Thank you.
Hey, y'all. Good morning again. Kalia with Virginia Student Power Network. I just wanted to clarify that community college students are eligible for Pell Grants. You have to have a minimum of 12 credit hours, and if you have under 12 hours, it's prorated. So that is handled already. And I wanted to just echo that we want to prioritize more equity for those most impacted by marijuana enforcement. And I think that could be a little bit more clear in the language. Thank you.
I want to just what Mr. Phillips said. I have the opportunity to work with a gentleman who spent 10 years in jail for marijuana charges. So when he came out, he had the training to get into the DMV program, which is called about training. So I infused some cash into his business, and today, that gentleman who spent 10 years of his life for possession of marijuana is now a thriving car dealership because he had the training and he had the opportunity to move forward. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Jesse Frierson, and we're using the term SWAM. 25 years ago, SWAM programs were seen as the holy grail for minorities to get involved in state spending. Back then, prior to SWAM, state spending was at 0.5% of 1%. Right now, it is still at 0.5% of 1%. So there is a significant concern in many communities about how SWAM programs are bypassed so that they don't achieve the objectives that they were originally intended to achieve. I just want to share that with you all, and if you all would pay close attention to that, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, Senator Rouse.
Thank you.
Stop. Get rid of the clock. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you all, everyone, for coming up and voicing their concerns. I also want to just reiterate, this is just the first step in a pretty big bill. So all the concerns, we'll try to make sure we adjust, but this bill has 2 more stops, okay? It has to go to courts, and then it has to go to finance as well. And so, again, all of the concerns and measures and trying to work with a broad coalition of folks who are all over the place. Just want to let you know we're definitely taking in your concerns and we'll try to address them.
Okay, so we need to focus our consideration right now on these equity provisions. Does any member of the committee have any comments about that or any amendments to the equity provisions in the bill?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Senator Favola.
And maybe this is for David May, but I'm expecting that regulations will be issued for the implementation of this bill. And in those regulations, some of the equity issues would be further fleshed out in terms of what documentation may be needed or whatever priority may be given. So it would be clearer for our general public and those who might be interested.
Mr. Chair, Senator Favola. Yeah, you're exactly right. Much of this is going to be fleshed out in regulations. In fact, all of the language that we're talking about with the criteria for the social equity applicants are located in the regulatory section for the CCA, with the acknowledgement that that's not something we can't legislate for every scenario. So that would be something the CCA would have to handle in regulations.
Thank
by
you.
December 31st.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to add.
Favola.
Thank you. And for those of you who are maybe not familiar with the regulatory process, it is fairly lengthy and there's a lot of opportunity for public input. There's usually a notice of regulation and then a preliminary regulation and a final. And the CCAA in this case would be responding to comments as well. So for those who are not here or for those who feel they want to present more information, as this evolves through the process, the regulatory aspect of implementation will be another opportunity for very extensive comment. So thank you.
Right. Mr. May, can you just clarify, though? I thought this has an APA exemption, so the regs can go out very quickly. Those regs, I guess, are emergency regs, and then the final regs would be promulgated after that. Is that how it'll work? And then there'll be that lengthy process the Senator just described. Is that right?
It may not be quite as lengthy as I described.
Senator Favola, yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Mr. Chair, this is a question for David. If we're looking at lines 1229 to 1235, could you maybe, addressing the first gentleman's concern, I think this language, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think this language kind of addresses his concern, which is that the board can waive past histories for licensees, right? So there's still, whether you're talking about the social equity license or just a license in general, right? There's this language in here that addresses that idea of your past, if it's related to a marijuana-related offense, for example, is not going to be held against you. Am I reading that right? And if I'm not, please tell me I'm not.
Mr. May. Under the last sentence says they shall not disqualify an applicant because of a past conviction for marijuana-related offense.
Yeah, so the general rule is going to be the board won't be allowed to issue a license to someone who's been convicted of a felony or offense of moral turpitude within the last 7 years. But you've obviously got this carve out here for the marijuana-related offenses. So yeah, and I don't know if I was interpreting this correct. I think the comments may have been more directed towards trying to have specific criteria in the social equity criteria for persons who have been impacted by a marijuana conviction, either themselves or...
Mr. May, you also just confirmed for me, though, that because of the petition-based criminal conviction sealing process that we passed in 2021, that if anybody has a conviction and they're able to actually get it sealed by a court, which will be a whole new process starting July 1 of 2025, that any kind of barrier crimes associated with that conviction are lifted with the sealing of the crime. So that's also an additional way for people to clean up their record in a way that might create less hurdles for this.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
Right. Is there any other questions, comments, amendments that we want to talk about with social equity amongst the committee? Nothing? No amendments? Okay, we're going to move on from equity then. And Senator Favola, I'm not sure did you hear my statement at the beginning about how we're going to handle the committee, Senator Favola? Did you hear my statement at the beginning of the committee about how we're going to handle the issues and structure the meeting?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So we're going to cover types of licenses and number of licenses. Then we're going to talk about regulations. And then the fourth thing we're going to talk about is enforcement. And we are not going to talk today about taxes, disposition of revenues, or any of the criminal provisions of the bill, which we'll talk about in the Courts of Justice Committee and the Finance Committees. So we have 3 more segments we're going through. So now we need to focus on the types of licenses and the numbers of licenses. And so, Mr. May, I don't know if you want to, what the patrons want to explain. I think Mr. May could explain really quickly, but I think we're setting up like a 3-tiered system like we have for alcohol or wine, beer, wine, that kind of thing. Why don't you walk people through the licensing provisions?
Sure. Mr. Chair, the licensure setup is similar to ABC in some sense, and it's different in others. So it's similar in the sense that you're going to have your 3 main tiers. Basically your wholesalers, which in this bill are called transporters. You've got your manufacturers, which are your cultivators here, and you've got your retail marijuana stores. Your 4th category, which doesn't exist in ABC, would be your testing licensees. There are prohibitions on having a retail cultivation or processing license if you have a testing license, just to keep this interest separate. But other than that, the license categories are not separate like ABC. So for ABC, for instance, if you're a manufacturer, you cannot have a wholesale license, you cannot have a retail license. We have those separate tiers. Underneath this bill, you could get a license in different categories. So you could be a cultivator, a processor, a transporter, and a retail marijuana store at the same time. You would have a cap of 5 total licenses, so you would kind of have to decide, what type of business you were really trying to push. But you could get licenses in different categories.
Mr. May, can you just clarify for me? I think the definition of being an owner of the business or whatever, I think is 60% equity ownership. Is that right? Or was it 66? So you could, for example, you could be less than a 66% owner in another business, and that wouldn't count towards the 5 license cap, right?
Mr. Chair, I believe the 66% is just for the social equity criteria. You'll have
the expert would.
We've got some different provisions to try to locate.
Maybe Mr. Abib can explain.
What's that?
Mr. Beat.
I think, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and Mr. Megan Fine, I think we used the 10% that existed previously, that you couldn't.
What line are we talking about, or part of the bill here?
I'm going to let Mr. May find the line because he's better at that. The 5 license issue is because we have tiers of cultivation to allow anywhere from 150 plants to 2,000 plants. And so it isn't that 5 consumes the whole thing. It's that some folks might have multiple cultivation licenses and then a processor license. And we have language in here, and this goes to the equity provisions. On my line 494, I'm not sure how this is printed for everybody, but that regulations for vertical integration have to be drawn so that small businesses, only for small businesses, and ensure that all licensees have an equal meaningful opportunity to participate in the market.
It's lines 858 to 869, Mr. Chair, for the limitations on licensees.
Yeah, it's using the section interest means an equity ownership interest or partial equity ownership interest or any other type of financial interest, including being an investor or serving in a management position.
I was looking at section 805.
That's
which is
it.
Multiple licenses awarded to one person limitations. And it defined an interest as partial ownership interest, and I thought that said 60%.
It's just, no, it's any interest. And so any interest you hold would count against any license for vertical integration purposes for your
Got it.
cap of 5.
Okay, maybe I was looking at a different 60% in the equity stuff then. Okay. Senator McDougal?
Mr. Chairman, and maybe this is just too far afield, but this would not prevent somebody from holding a note and financing the whole deal. So you might not have a equity interest, but you could have a financial interest.
Well, it'd be up to the CCA to establish the regs, Mr. Chairman, Senator McDougal, but arguably including being an investor.
Well,
Senator McDougal.
Mr. Chairman, I would say if I lent somebody money, that would not necessarily make me an investor. That would make me like a financial institution.
It's a secure transaction. If it's secured by interest in the business, again, that would be up to the CCA regs. And certainly if that wants to be clarified, the point is simply to allow you to have a certain number, but not to allow someone to have a piece of every business.
Senator McDougal, I think, one way you might want to, we could clarify that, would be to say, including being an investor or having an economic interest in. Is that fine?
It currently says financial interest.
It says any other type of financial interest, including being an investor or serving in a management position. Any other type of financial or, so you think it needs to say financial or economic, or you think financial interest, any other financial interest is enough?
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Could be. Yeah, Senator Van Valkenburg.
I think it doesn't hurt to clarify here, because that's, if it gets done in a way that we don't intend, it could have huge economic consequences. So I think clarifying is not necessarily a bad thing here.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Green, what we're trying to avoid, though, is not allowing a lender to lend into the industry.
Right. It gets complicated because you don't want to say that a bank can only lend to one licensee and that's it, and then it's Mr. May. Would you say?
Mr. Chair, so the idea here, basically, obviously, if you have an equity interest in it, you would have interest and have ownership.
Yeah.
The language added that says or any other type of financial interest was intended to say, if you have any financial interest whatsoever in the success of this company, it may be considered a loan. I think you're going to go down a difficult path if you get too specific on this. But by saying a financial interest, if you're impacted in any monetary way by the business, this language would technically capture you. But the CCA would have to have some regulations on that because that's pretty broad.
Yeah, that's why we have regs.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I think we all agree on the goal. It's just a words question.
Okay. All right. Any comment from the committee before we get to public testimony? Okay, let's set the timer for 10 minutes, Jillian, and then, you want to say 5? Yeah. Well, it looks like we only got one speaker, so let's go 5. 2, 3. Okay.
I just wanted to also, before I start
4.
with the licenses piece, I just also wanted to add that I'm willing to share some language as well. It's not just about the financial ownership, it's also about decision-making power. And there's some language that we have modeled out of Massachusetts that also just talks about decision-making power, veto power, the power to appoint directors. And these are the types of things that really run a business. It's not always how much ownership and financial that you have. So we'd really like to offer that language to also be included and evaluated when you are looking at how this actually plays out with intention, because we've seen only financial not be the thing that actually does decision-making powers.
Language in writing.
Yep, I'll send that right on over. And as far as the financial,
sorry, how are you gonna?
Sorry,
how paper or you? We need to make the amendments like now. So
yep,
yeah, okay.
I can email it right now.
Okay, all right.
And then for the licenses, we're just going to ask again, there is a difference between excluding those impacted, which we appreciate this bill does not do, but equity is about the intentional inclusion. And so again, asking for a direct license for impacted people and impacted veterans, as well as just that money for startup. So that is the pieces for the licensing that I continue to have, and I will email that to you all right now.
Thanks. Next.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I'm Becky Hobden. I'm the lab director for Green Analytics Virginia. We were the first cannabis testing lab in the state, working with hemp farmers back in 2019, and we've continued to grow and now work for testing for home growers, pharmaceutical processors, and hemp as well. So we've definitely seen a lot of transitions in this industry, and I appreciate this bill, but there are a few things that I think need to be modified a little bit. One of them is the transportation license, or the restriction for a licensed testing facility to transport marijuana products, because part of our job is right now we do pick up samples from our customers. That is regulated under our controlled substance registration with the Board of Pharmacy. We have protocol of how we transport material. And so I think unintentionally this structure cut out that ability and actually made it a Class 1 misdemeanor. I was looking at the bill that's online, so there may have, I've just recently seen the substitute. So, but,
So the carve-out doesn't carve you out of having
Hold
a
on,
transport
son.
license?
it does cut.
It does not carve you.
What it says, and I don't think that we particularly need a transporter license. That's not really the intent of the license. We need to be an exception to where we can transport marijuana products between our facility, which is a licensed lab facility, and the cultivators or processors. So, and in many other states, that's actually a requirement that the lab actually collects samples and brings them back to their facility. So whether that's changed where we are able to get a transporter license so that we can do that, or whether that's just carved out as an exception for lab testing facilities, that it's not considered a Class 1 misdemeanor to transport.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. You get 3 other people in 1 minute.
Okay, so the other piece, I think that looking at the limits to the number of licenses, I believe that there needs to be a cap to the number of testing facilities licensed. I think that looking at other states, there's a phenomenon called lab shopping, where if too many labs open up and there's unhealthy competition, that can really impact the quality and safety of what we're looking at. But those are my 2 parts of recommendation.
Senator Van Valkenburg has a question for you, I think.
Well, no, I don't. David, where's the number of licenses in the bill? What line number?
It's, Mr. Chair.
It's in 4.1-606. I can give you a line number.
401 606 C1, I think.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, it's on page 18, at least on the version that I had printed from yesterday.
It's on page 19, lines 481 to 486.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Senator Van Valkenburg.
I think her point about putting a limit on the number of testing facilities makes a lot of sense. I don't think, but I think we also created a tiered system for a reason when we're talking about the transportation piece, which is trying to separate all these tasks out, which is partly so we're not having vertical integration, partly so we're having this kind of be decentralized a little bit. And I think the concern about the standards would be met when all those transportation businesses have to meet the regs of the board. So I don't know that I would be okay with that change, but I do think putting a cap on the number of testing facilities makes a lot of sense.
Or even like the amount that you can
Excuse, make sure you go through the chair, okay? You had something you wanted to say?
Well, I think just putting a cap on the amount of, we're not looking to get a transporter license. I think the intention was different.
but I think it is part of our role is picking up samples, and like I said, in many other states, that's actually part of the regulation where the testing facility is required to pick up the samples from the facility. So if we're not able to even pick it up and drive it back to our lab, transport it back to our lab for testing, that's a issue for us.
Okay, got it.
That's what we're currently doing that.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
Senator Van Valkenburg.
I would ask her, do we have a understanding in other states of what the limits have been on the number of testing facilities so that we're not just winging some number here?
So looking at the amount that we've tested over the past 3 years.
We're talking about the number of facilities, the number of licenses.
Right. So I don't have a number, but my recommendation would be 3 or 4, based on the number of samples that we see on a daily basis and the number of limits for the regulations that as they're written.
Okay, so Senator Van Valkenburg, you want to move to add a subsection E, limited at 5, and then maybe we'll see what.
Mr. Chair, I don't know that we should. That seems pretty small when we're talking about a statewide market.
Okay. Well, Senator, we need to put a number in, and we'll get more feedback about it. We can always change it as we go.
How about we put 10?
You want to make a motion?
Yeah.
Make a motion.
Can I,
Senator Rouse.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Beebe here.
Yeah.
There's nothing magic about this. Frankly, you could either delegate it to CCA to say identify the number of appropriate transporter licenses at any given time. You could set a number. Frankly, I'm not sure that any of us are experts. I would just be picking in the dark if I gave you a number. We just want to make sure that there is safe, secure seed to sale tracking and transportation.
Okay. All right. Hold on. So, Mr. May, I think the consensus up here seems to be to make an amendment around having a subsection E. It just says marijuana testing facilities as determined by the CCA or something like that. Okay? Okay. So I think Senator Van Valkenburg moves, Rouse seconds to make that amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay.
I do think, Mr. Chairman, the policy issue she raises on whether or not they should have any other licenses, including transporters, they are excluded testing facilities from having any license. So they would have to use a third-party transport. They're saying they would like to do it themselves. That's a policy decision.
I heard that. Okay. I heard that. And does any member want to, before we move on, discuss that? No. It doesn't sound like anybody wants to make a motion to change that right now. Up here. Okay. All right, next.
Mr. Chair, Kayla Mock with UFCW 400. I have a point of clarification to speaking to a condition of licensure, such as labor peace agreements. Would you like me to speak to that now or during regulation?
Yeah, I think it's probably more for regulation. Yep. Thanks.
How you doing? My name again is Clifton Coe. I happen to, I guess, disagree with the cap as far as allowing people to loan, because when you make a loan, capital leases is a loan. The equipment that is necessary to run a processing it takes capital lease, it takes money to run these businesses. So capital lease should not be considered.
Right. I think we decided that loans probably aren't covered, or else a bank would only ever be able to lend to one licensee, and that's it. So it's probably where those regs will come out, is my guess. So next, yeah. You already had your shot. All right.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make sure that when we talk about licensing and how many you can have, to make sure that small businesses don't get excluded based on the majority firms, large firms that will be coming in. And I only have a question based on federal guidelines that a lot of minority-owned businesses have investors at 33% in their companies, and will that be penalized based on the number of licenses of who their ownership is? And that's based on MSDC guidelines. And so I just want to kind of ask that question, and then also kind of look at making sure that we incorporate and not penalize anybody that's doing a mentor-protege program using federal guidelines. If a majority company does a mentorship protege program with a smaller company, that does not penalize them based on their licensors.
Ms. Higgs-Wise, time's up. What do you got? You already spoke.
Just for the cultivation tiers, we love that. We would actually just seeing best practices across the country. Instead of going by plant count, we can ask the CCA to look at square footage to then create tiers for that. So square footage seems more apt for better to maneuver with business owners versus a plant count. So we just want to offer that.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for the testimony on licensing issues and numbers of licenses. I just had a question for Senator Rouse, or it might be for Eben, or I don't know, Habib, maybe somebody can answer this, but where do the numbers come from? 450, 60, and 450? I'm trying to understand, like, I want to make sure we're not creating too many licenses or not having too few.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the 400 was what you all passed in the original bill. The original bill several years ago was 400 for retail. That's where that came from. The wholesalers were set at 25 in the original bill. We didn't feel like there was actually a space for wholesalers, but that we did need transporters. And frankly, we picked a number 50 that we thought could serve the entire market and be statewide. Processing facilities, we left at 60 from the original bill, and cultivation facilities, we left at 450 from the original bill. So there really aren't any changes except adding in the transporters. Otherwise, it's what you all did 3 years ago.
Senator Eben, I think this was your bill 3 years ago, right?
I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, some of the limits came from Senator Van Valkenburg on the House side, that he had strong feelings about limiting licenses, and I thought it was the House version that they came from where he pulled out those numbers. Yeah.
I get it. Right. My recollection is that the 400 number came from roughly the number of ABC stores we have in Virginia. Is that right?
Yeah, that's roughly. Yes. And there is, Mr. Chairman, I'll point the committee.
Mr. Habib. Yeah.
I'll point the committee to a enactment clause 6, the very end of the bill, and it just says Virginia Cannabis Control Authority shall analyze whether any limit shall be placed on the number of licenses issued to operate a marijuana establishment and report their findings back. So that's one thing they're charged with, is evaluating that limits question. And they're to report back prior to next General Assembly session, prior to retail sales beginning.
Okay. Thank you. So does everybody feel like ABC store as a proxy, as the number of licenses, is the best way to approach this?
I think J-Lock
did J-Lock suggest that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a bunch of people more informed about that than I am. So any other discussion, any motions, any amendments about the number of licenses or the types of licenses? Doesn't look like it. Okay. So now we're going to move on to regulations. Mr. May, you want to give us, this I guess is into THC limits, testing, labeling, packaging, those issues, right? Page 16, 78, 72 to 75, 75 to 79. THC limits are 16 and 78. Pages 16 and 78. Mr. May, why don't you break it down that way? Why don't you tell us what the THC limits are?
Mr. Chair, yeah. So we have some THC limits that were part of the provisions of the bill that actually did become law, which set the caps at 5 milligrams per serving and 50 milligrams per package. This draft increases it to 10 milligrams per serving, 100 milligrams per package, which I believe is pretty standard practice in the cannabis industry, and I think it aligns with the medical program as well. So I think we just shot a little bit low at first, and now we're kind of getting everything aligned on that piece. And yeah, it's in 2 different locations, probably unnecessarily, but they're the same at least. So.
Okay, and testing, labeling, packaging is 72 through 75, and then labeling, packaging, safety, testing is 72 to 75, labeling, packaging, safety requirements, same place.
Yeah, right. Mr. Chair, you'll find all of that in Chapter 14. So the only other thing you'll find in Chapter 14 is advertising. We initially had that in the bill, but we had a couple bills that went through last year that dealt with the advertising, so we were able to take that out. But all of your testing, labeling, and packaging provisions are there. It largely tracks the language that we have used in the past. We've done some tweaks here and there, but they're very intensive rules as far as the packaging and labeling and testing and authorization and directives for the CCA to get even more detailed, especially on the testing pieces of it.
Okay, so somebody want to explain what's in it? Mr. Habib, you want to give a quick version, or Senator Rouse?
I think Mr. May did a pretty good summary. Let me just take one step back to make you feel better about what you did. Those numbers actually started with the JLARC study, I think. The JLARC study gave some ranges. JLARC said issue between 100 and 800 cultivation licenses, 30 and 150 processing distribution licenses, 200 to 600 retail licenses. I think you all had the benefit of that information at the time you evaluated those decisions, and you made those decisions and sort of placed these numbers within those ranges. So I think you can take some solace in that. The THC limits, the only adjustments from top 5 to 10 milligrams and from 50 to 100 milligrams per package. That seems more appropriate in the market. It still keeps fairly tight limits and doesn't allow sort of mass quantities. We did, as you mentioned, increase the ounces from 1 to 2.5. That is, of course, a policy decision for you all to make. But yeah, Mr. May pointed out that second place where we did the THC limits. The testing, labeling, packaging, all of those requirements, they are, in fact, very, very strict. The board has to have lots of, this is a lot of the pages are in the 70s, 80s, and on. Very specific about what they have to test for: residual solvents, poisons, toxins, chemicals, molds, mildews. It's very specific on the testing side what they need to do. I think we, as you heard earlier, we actually have some pretty professional labs in Virginia that are currently testing not only hemp products, but we have at least one of, if not more than one of, the leading vape testing labs in America is actually in Richmond. And so we have some folks set up doing some of this work already, and I'm sure the market will bring other folks to bear. The page 75 on mine, this is 4.1, 1405. Mr. Chairman, is where the labeling packaging requirements come up. They are very specific. There's very specific warning language on there. We've got the, all caps, here's what you have to say language. That's, again, on my version, what's subsection 8 under 1405. It's got font sizes that you have to have, all the things you'd expect. But break down the ingredients, the THC content, the milligrams, all of that. Obviously, we have no sales to folks under 21, so those are built into the packaging and labeling. We have some of the same things you dealt with in hemp around like trademarked products and those types of things. All of that is in there. We have limitations on additives that are harmful, no alcohol or nicotine, nothing misleading to consumers, no marketing to people under 21. This is all new language, but it is all borrowed language from ABC, from hemp, from other things that you all have done. Since I mentioned ABC, we also incorporated a lot of the ABC reasons why you can't be eligible for a license or could lose your license. A lot of that language should look very familiar and comfortable, especially to you all who've served on the ABC subcommittee for a while. Again, at a high level, there may be some disagreements on minutia. Nobody, and every one of the proponents, I believe, would agree, nobody wants products sold to kids. Nobody wants products unlabeled. Everybody wants them strictly tested. The whole point of this is to get untested products off the street and get products away from kids. And so we feel very comfortable with the specificity that is in there, and then the delegation to the CCA, of course, to go from there and implementing that. And they can, obviously, whether through the regulatory process or through advising you all in the future of changes that need to be made, I think it'll continue to be a work in progress.
Okay, thanks. So can we set the clock for? Okay, Senator Van Valkenburg has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this could be for David May. It could be for Mr. Habib. Can you talk to me at how concentration, right? Concentration of the product and how that's written in here versus, and how it kind of compares to other states. I know that's I know that's something that people care a lot about. I know it's something that concentration levels in these products have only gone up over time, which makes them more dangerous theoretically, right? It's not, it's not your grandmother's pot. How does this bill address that? That's something I didn't really see in my read through, or it could just be because I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm not sure if that is addressed by the milligrams per serving and milligrams per packaging. So the concentration would be the percentage of those milligrams relative to any other part of the product. But ultimately, we do it by milligram caps. I don't remember that we had any other concentration language in there, Mr. May.
Mr. Chair, Senator Van Valkenburg. So yeah, that's an interesting issue. Which, if you look at, so we're talking about, one example is 4.1-1406, which begins on lines 2043. Here we are talking about various rules, safety requirements for edible marijuana products and other retail marijuana products deemed applicable by the authority. So there's a little bit of wiggle room for the authority here on these issues. Edible marijuana products for sure are going to be limited to 10 milligrams per serving, 100 milligrams per package period. So there's no real issue there. If there's some sort of concentrate product for which these limits wouldn't work, I think it gives the board the discretion to figure out what the appropriate limits on that particular product would be.
Can I butt in right there?
Okay.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
Senator Valkenburg, go ahead.
Would it make sense to be a little bit more clear to the board that they need to address it in their regs?
Yeah, if you give me a second, we've got I will have to find it, but there is a provision in here that directs the board to basically have THC limits that aren't otherwise governed by the provisions of the bill. So they will have to have some sort of limit.
Mr. Chair.
So, hold on, Senator Favola, then Senator Reeves, and I have a question, maybe. Senator Favola.
I have a quick question. In terms of the labeling, we are requiring childproof labeling. Childproof packaging is what I meant to say. That's in there.
Yep. Okay, Senator Reeves.
I'm sorry, I missed what page is on this. By milligram or by percentage?
I think it was, it was milligrams, yeah. Yeah, Mr. May, I had a couple questions. So my recollection was we had some debate over the hemp products about ratios and like milligrams per weight or whatever, and there's ways to make products that are like super concentrated or whatever, dangerous, depending on how you, which approach do we take here?
Yeah. Mr. Chair. Yeah, so the big issue with hemp was it was based on a percentage. So what you could do to pack a lot of THC into a hemp product was make the product really heavy. And the heavier you make it, the more THC you can pack into it and still be underneath the 0.03%. Here, so the better way to regulate it is to, especially for the products, is to do it by milligram, which is what we've done. No matter how heavy or light you make it, you can only have this specific amount of THC in the product, so it's more controlled as far as the effects it's going to have on the user.
And Mr. Chairman, members, if I may, what you did, the original bill for hemp was just a milligram cap. That's what this has. The governor sent down an amendment that added the 25-to-1 CBD to THC ratio as an exception to that milligram cap. We have not provided any such exception. We have just the hard milligram cap, which is the stricter way to regulate, as opposed to adding in a ratio exception.
Okay. And Senator Favola, just note that the childproof language lines 20, 21 through 23 in the bill, page 76. Mr. May, the other question I had was, I know we had some discussions, endless discussions with hemp gummies and stuff with Senator Hanger's bill, for which I made Instagram, talking about putting Delta 8 in a tomato. Where we were talking about animal shapes and stuff that might be attractive to children. Do we have any kind of language like that in this?
Mr. Chair, I believe we already have that prohibition in current law. I'm trying to pull it up.
We added it, Mr. Chairman. It's on page 78. It says it's about attractive to children. I just took my eyes off of it. And it says, oh yeah, it's sub 7, little IV are misleading to customers, or 5 are specifically designed to make the product appeal particularly to persons younger than 21.
61 to 62 in the bill? Yeah. Okay, got it. All right, those are my questions. You set the timer 10 minutes and come on up if you have comments about this. Wow. Category? Yeah, we're talking about the regulations. So, packaging, THC limits, testing, safety, stuff like that.
Are you going to take 4 first and then counter?
No, I'm just going to do it all together. Okay. All right, so Mix Panini, what do you got?
Mr. Chair, if you're interested in discussing concentration, I'm happy to answer any questions regarding how we deal with that in the medical program. We haven't had any issues today.
Yeah, I'm not sensing a whole lot of need to change it up here, so.
It's this mirrors that, so it would be appropriate. This is in subsection 1405 regarding labeling, and I do see that there is as applicable in the sentence before. However, this is line, I think, 1986, calling for the date of cultivation, processing, and packaging. Cultivation happens over a period of time, so what date is that? Processing.
Sorry, 1986, you said? What code section are you in?
This is 1405.
Okay, that starts on 1986, yeah. What line are you talking about now?
This is section 1. This is 1. Number 1, identification of type of retail marijuana or retail marijuana product and the date of cultivation, processing, and packaging.
Yep.
From a consumer perspective, only one of those dates might be even possibly relevant, because this would also include an expiration date. I don't know what date my milk was bottled on, but I do know when it expires. And asking for all 3 of these is probably a bit overkill from a consumer perspective.
I guess we don't age marijuana like fine wine or something.
Sort of.
All right.
That's
okay.
it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair, members, Tom Antorcio with the Virginia Catholic Conference. We oppose commercialization, but I will speak to the specific references in the bill that you asked for comment on, and that is namely the raising the milligram limit from 5 to 10 milligrams. That is not a good idea. The reason it's not a good idea is because even the national industry associations have set a best practice of 5 milligrams. If you ask the national organizations that are represented here by state affiliates, they will say that it's 5 milligrams is the industry standard. That is the gold standard from the industry itself. And the reason for that is because 5 milligrams could knock each one of you backwards if you took it in a relative short amount of time. And by that I mean, if you ingested a concentrate or you took an edible unawares, that's the problem that states are running into is, you sell a THC infused cookie, right? And who eats a cookie one nibble at a time? No, you take a good bite out of the cookie and then you go back for the second bite and you finish the cookie. Well, then it catches up with you. 5 milligrams catches up with you pretty quickly. And so that's why you don't want to raise it beyond 5 milligrams. That was the original term of the Eben bill in 2021, correct? 2021. That was the original term in the bill. It had strong support among those who voted for this bill. And I would encourage you and respectfully ask you to not raise it to 10 milligrams. Thank you.
Good morning again, Kayla Mock with UFCW Local 400. In addition to representing grocery workers and meatpacking workers, we also represent cannabis workers across 7 states. And so we are concerned about the lack of worker protections in this bill, specifically with labor peace agreements. The adult cannabis industry is looking to add about 11,000 to 18,000 new jobs in Virginia. And you guys really have an opportunity to make sure that they are high standard, sustainable jobs. Labor peace agreements aren't new. This has been in previous iterations of the bill. It's been used in this industry in other states with great success. And so I'm happy to answer any other questions, but we hope that there will be worker protections added in. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I didn't realize the whole food connection, but when I toured the Jushi facility, the guy there he had his undergraduate in food preparation, and then he got his master's in marijuana cultivation. So go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, as I spoke earlier about the referendum, don't leave your cousin behind, which is industrial hemp. Because again, when we talk about regulations, we've been asked to move things to 1% where they're at 6%, so those farmers who wish to do industrial hemp, that their crops are not destroyed. And so please let us work closely so that we don't leave that cousin behind and not penalize hemp broadly in this bill as well as CBD. Remember, Virginia was the largest state that did and grew industrial hemp.
Thank you. Next up.
Hi, this is Barbara Biddle. I'm a retailer in the hemp industry and a representative of the Virginia Hemp Coalition. To provide context, I've been in business since 2017. And we've weathered various challenges, but none.
Where are you from?
I'm sorry?
Where?
Manassas and Leesburg, also
Thank you.
DC.
Got it. Thanks.
None more devastating than the impact of SB 903, which passed last year. My hope was to use SB 423 as a vehicle to right some of those wrongs instead of taking a step backwards. And some of the aspects of this bill do just that. A few provisions that we deem a step backwards is a mention of industrial hemp extract and the additional legal liabilities associated with it. While I understand the intention behind deterring bad actors, the current civil penalties amounting to 6 figures for some should be effective enough. Piling on criminal liability without an effective system for enforcement or resources for businesses to properly reach compliance seems unproductive. There's thousands of businesses that currently carry hemp products and only a handful of inspectors to enforce the new regulations.
Just really quick, could you direct us to what line you were talking about?
Yes, one moment.
Or code section to find?
Uh, 3.2-5145.
3.2-514.
Sellers or manufacturers of industrial hemp extracts penalties.
Yeah, it's gone.
Oh, it's gone? Yeah. Oh, okay. Awesome. Sorry. I appreciate that. So in relation to the THC limits, just based on my experience selling them previously, most people consider 5 milligrams a starting dose. Myself, I take 50 milligrams, and that's middle ground for a lot of people. So my fear is that by implementing that cap, it's going to force people back to either the black market or having to take 20 to 30 units just to reach their optimal dose. It's not going to fix their tolerance. So I do suggest, looking at that more carefully and taking those considerations. And that's all I have for you guys today.
Thank you. Ms. Higgs-Wise.
I just wanted to also put our comments to UFCW, as well as we know, particularly having minorities in this industry, a lot of times they will come in as workers, particularly with their expertise underneath the operator that is owning. So continuing to put that language that was in the bill at first in 2021 back in and was taken out by Senator Eben in 2022. So we wanted to also align our comments there and support worker protections.
Thank you. We appreciate the comments about worker protections. I think we also are hoping to get some bipartisan support, Senator Reeves, and maybe from some of your colleagues, which that might create some issues on. So that's it for the testimony. We got 26 minutes before caucus starts. One more segment to get through.
Pardon me, I just wanted to also just
get back to the Catholic Conference. Yeah, we had a couple minutes left on the
clock. Could I just give you one quick addendum item to what I said earlier, and that is not only is it the industry standard 5 milligrams, but the National Institute of Drug Abuse, NIDA, announced a new standard unit for THC, 5 milligrams. And so this is to set a standard TH dose for research. Okay, so that's the other thing is we don't have enough data on safety. And so NIDA has set this at 5 milligrams for research purposes, and we should align our code with what NIDA is doing so that we can benefit from the information cross-pollination that will occur at that 5 milligram
Okay,
limit.
Senator
Thank
Rouse.
you.
Yeah. Senator
Thank
Rouse.
you. I just read an article as well that the FDA finds cannabis to be more like Tylenol than heroin. I don't have a question for you, just more of a comment, sir. You can have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
And from that notion, if you take too many Tylenol as well, it could be harmful to you, to your body as well. So I find, we'll take in the concern, but even if you consume alcohol, Tylenol, any drugs will have a harmful effect more than it intended use will have a harmful effect to your body.
Okay, Mr. Beebe, then we got to get over to the Uber chair. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I never interrupt the Uber chair.
No, that's okay. I would just say when we had the conversation on the hemp bill, which was, I think, last year, I'm losing by context of time. The smaller the ratio, the 5 milligrams per package, or however we measure it by weight, is probably a better approach because folks can buy multiple packages, or they can figure out how to add up to an amount that they feel is comfortable to them. But having it, per package, I think has the potential of reducing any surprises or people, taking more than they had expected. That's my point.
Okay, that's a point.
So,
Senator Van Valkenburg has something he wants to say too. You might want to hear that before you respond.
Yeah, I guess, Mr. Chair, I guess I started this conversation in some ways with the concentration. So maybe this will end it. But council pointed me to lines 419 to 423, which I think there's a couple important things to note about. It says, right, the board gets to establish a maximum level up to 10 milligrams. So they don't have to choose 10 milligrams. They can go up to 10 milligrams. And the second thing I'll note is this bill models the original bill where I put in that the Health Advisory Board has veto power over this regulation. So the Health Advisory Board that we created in the original bill has veto power over, it's like 5 or 6 regs that would impact public health, and this is one of them. So you would have 2 bodies that would be looking over the reg that would determine what's appropriate. So I'll just point that out, and that, I think that gives me comfort.
Hold on.
Senator Van Valkenburg said literally exactly what I was going to say.
Okay. Okay. Is there any other discussion about those pieces? Okay, we got 22 minutes. Now we're going to move on to enforcement. Yep. Mr. May, you want to explain what we got in here for enforcement? I'm sorry. Wait, is enforcement? Is that all the criminal stuff?
Yeah. So we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk about conditions for which the license might be denied or revoked. How about that? We're not going to get into the criminal stuff today. I think it's 4.1809 and 4.1900 through 904.
Mr. Chair, so yeah, these 2 sections, they are a little different, but they're very similar to each other. This is essentially, while it's worded in a way of like, the board doesn't have to, or in some instances isn't allowed to issue a license when some of these things are met. This is basically the criteria that the board is going to look at when they're issuing licenses. It's just worded backwards. Like I said, both of them are very similar. They're also very similar to what we look at when we're issuing ABC licenses. This is a list of criteria that we've come up with throughout the years of issues that we've run into with ABC applicants. So you've got to, this is not pulled out of thin air. It may prove that some of these things may not be necessarily as relevant for the cannabis licensees, but without our retail market, we don't really know. So well, we know that process works, so we base it on the ABC rules. I'm happy to explain any of them specifically. We talked earlier about one of the bigger pieces is your criminal history, and we do have the limit that you haven't committed a felony or an offense of moral turpitude within the last 7 years. But we also have that carve-out that we looked at earlier. It doesn't apply to marijuana-related offenses. So again, I'm happy to look at any provision specifically, but that was kind of the thought process in putting those provisions together.
Okay, so we're going to set it at 5 minutes. People come on up if you have any testimony about conditions for which the license might be denied or revoked.
Hi, Chelsea again. This is a piece of Evan's bill that we really did like. Instead of the 7 years, he has 3. So we would ask for that change to be put into this bill. So 3 years banning versus the 7 years for felonies.
So,
you offer as an amendment?
somebody else wants to make the amendment, they got to make the amendment.
Thank you.
Do you want to make the amendment? 7 to 3. She can make an motion.
And I'd also just mention the moral turpitude piece is very wide in range, and someone that committed a petty larceny many years ago could still be someone that is said that they are a violation of moral turpitude. So we'd also like to look at that.
So just also remember, though, that under the automatic sealing provisions of the sealing legislation we passed, petty larcenies are automatically sealed after 7 years, and they would be wiped out. They wouldn't count towards this if they're automatically sealed or sealed by petition.
Correct. And that's the only reason why we would want to make sure it's included here if we move it to 3 years, because they have yet to be sealed. So we would not want that moral turpitude to also be included. So we're looking at the Eben language here.
So I make an amendment, move it from 7 to 3.
Which where are we in?
What line is that on?
Mr. Chair, that would be on lines 906 to 908, I believe.
906 to 908.
And the 7-year mark is specifically on line 907.
Okay, been convicted of any felony or crime of multiple in the United States. 70 it's not complete on terms of date of the application. He wants to change it on line 907. Senator Rouse would like to change it to from 7 years to 3.
Mr. Chair, we take comments on that amendment?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, there's nothing magical about any of these dates. There is some attempt to get a bill with some bipartisan buy-in and bicameral buy-in and maybe, the executive branch buy-in. And so we would like to balance the opportunity with advancing a bill. I don't know what that magic number is, whether it's 3, 7, or something in between, but just something to keep in mind.
I would just say that, we intentionally picked a 7-year blackout for filing a sealing petition on misdemeanors, sort of as a conservative estimate of a period of time that somebody should show good behavior before they are able to file a petition to seal. And the intent was to revisit that at some point in the future if there was some kind of evidence-based information we could consider to look at what the appropriate period of time was. That's only for sealing, not for sealing the petition, not for licensing. And it just seems to me having 2 different policy standards on that might be inconsistent. And anyway, if there's is there a motion? You made the motion. Was there a second?
Motion make a compromise.
Hold on a second. First of all, let's get in the right posture. You made the motion. Was there a second?
Well, I want to amend my motion.
I'll second it so we can have a discussion about it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, but how would you like to amend it?
Just instead of 3, it was just 5 years.
Okay.
Just trying to find some middle ground.
Okay.
I understand about the
I'm not
uniformity, but
I'm not.
If you want to keep it at 7,
I want to keep it at 7, but I might get outvoted, Mr. Senator Rouse. So I don't.
Can you look at this in courts?
The judiciary would,
Yeah, there we could.
Okay.
so we could leave it as is. This bill
Okay,
will
Senator
be
Rouse
re-referred.
withdraws his motion. Okay. I don't think we were done with the testimony yet either. So go ahead.
Remarks very brief. Currently today, we have farmers who are growing industrial hemp that are threatened to be arrested because of the amount not being at 1%. So just think about that when I keep driving it home about industrial hemp being included in this bill and the ratio and that percentage. Also, if you could consider a certified seed program through the state to make sure people are following the rules that you are trying to put in place as well.
Just in regards to the time for felonies, I would like to just mention, though I know the medical program is not looked upon fondly here, in terms of bipartisan support, it is already established as 3 years in the medical program, and I think it would be wise to take that precedent over into all things adult use. And this is the type of support we'd love to be providing in terms of informing folks around what's happening in the medical program and how we can take that best practice over to an adult use transition. Thank you.
Talk about it again. All right, you have a comment? We got 2.5 minutes. Yeah.
I can see the time. My comments are not related to the categories, but if it would be the permission of the chairman to at least...
We'll save that for the end. Okay.
Right, we still have time for that.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Doesn't look like there's any more testimony on this piece, though.
Mr. Chairman, there's one thing I want to draw everyone's attention to, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in this category. There is a fairly unique provision that bars licenses for members of the General Assembly for 5 years when this bill is passed. That is in here in an enactment clause. That is not a normal provision. We do not normally prohibit elected officials from participating in regulated markets. But that's in here. I don't want anyone to not know it's in there. It is in, I think it's in 4, enactment clause 4. And so there was, that provision is
line 4618.
Yeah, that has been in and out of versions, and there's been significant debate over that. I don't know that needs to be in there. It's in there today. Frank, I think it should probably come out.
I agree 100%. That's not a precedent we're going to set.
Yeah, I think it's a weird precedent.
So, is there, okay, so Senator Rouse has moved. Is there a second? I'll second. That we strike the language on lines 4617 through 4619 about members of the General Assembly. Is there any discussion about that? No discussion about that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there anybody opposed?
Thank you.
Got it. No. It's not a recorded vote, but it's noted on the video that Senator Reeves and Senator McDougal voted no. Okay.
Last comment, particularly about the regulations and who can get what, and especially since we brought up the elected officials. I also wanted to mention, I can't find it right now if I get a moment, about certain law enforcement having access to the industry if they apply, thank you, if they apply outside of where they live. I think it's also just making sure that no active law enforcement are able to qualify for licenses, and just wanted to double check that. Yeah, I'm going to have to find that and would love some support on that one for
Mr. May, same place?
35.
It's on page 35.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, yeah, it's going to be in that same section.
It's
on 35.
It's little I. It says, is a police officer with police authority in the political subdivision within which
it's in the enactment clause, or it's in...
No, I'm sorry. It's on page 35. It's in the conditions under which the board shall or may refuse to grant. It says they shall refuse to grant, and then there's a long list of little letters, and so then it's 1, and then I is a police officer with police authority in the political subdivision within which the establishment designated.
All right, so it needs to basically say is currently employed as a police officer? Okay, so somebody have a motion on line 23 to make that amendment? It's moved and seconded. Is there any...
It may be a court's question of who you define, want to capture in that police officer.
Right. So hold on a sec. Senator, Mr. May, what?
With police authority, if they're not, doesn't that suggest active? I think Mr. May will probably have something to say.
Mr. Chair, one clarifying point on that. It's only if you're an officer in the locality in which you're going to operate that establishment, with the idea of being, they would rather have someone else have that enforcement within that locality. We can get rid of it, but I just wanted to note that it is a little bit narrower than just saying you can't be a law enforcement officer, period.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I thought their argument was going the other direction, that they shouldn't be able to do it anywhere.
Right.
That
you're trying to
they would like
say
law
you want to
enforcement,
take out the part of the locality.
Yeah. They would like law enforcement not to be in this industry. Right. That's a policy decision. I don't have an opinion on it. Again, I think, was that taken from ABC?
Yeah.
I believe it was.
I think that's from ABC. It's fairly normal, but.
Okay. Ms. Higgs-Wise?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's often times where localities work together and cross over counties and district lines to work with each other. And so this would just prevent any type of conflict of interest coming in. And not to mention the enforcement pieces that we are seeing. And it just makes sense, particularly if we are combating the disproportionate drug war and equity and not reaching those impacted people, that we can at least put some limits on those that were enforcing this disproportionately.
Okay, sorry, you have something to say
We
about
would
this?
just strongly second that.
Sorry, who are you?
I'm Kalia Harris with the Virginia Student Power Network and the Cannabis Justice Coalition. We would support taking that language out about the police officers. Thank you.
Hey, Senator Van Valkenburg.
Chair, can we kick that to courts? I mean,
It's my problem no matter where we deal with it.
that's what you get. That's what you get.
Yeah.
You're a lawyer.
Yeah, right, okay.
I don't mind kicking.
Say, Senator Rouse?
Mr. Chairman, I don't mind kicking it to courts, but I also know you all deal with a lot in courts, and if we could strike it now, then, and I think there was a motion.
I would move that we follow the advice that our presenters just gave us.
Okay, so it sounds like Senator Favola moves, Senator Rouse seconds to strike lines 923 and 924 from the bill, is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there any discussion about that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, they want the opposite of that, don't they? If you strike it, then if you strike it, then you would let any
want to amend the line to say any police officer authority anywhere.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I think they want it to say is a police officer, period.
Period.
Okay, okay.
But how you define police officers.
Okay, Pat, well, hold on a sec. First of all, we're not talking about police officers, we're talking about police and sheriff's deputies, right? So it would, and there needs to be a, Mr. May might have a better way to do it,
Yeah.
be a,
Maybe David
somebody
May
who's a
can-
certified police officer by DCJS or something like that. Wouldn't that pick it up?
Mr. Chair, yeah, the best way to do it would be to, on line 923, after A, strike the rest of 923 and all of 924 and replace it with law enforcement officer, and then we'll do a cross-reference there to one of our existing, like, broad law enforcement definitions. Police officer is just not the term that we use.
Well, but the problem with that is there's lots of other police officers that like private police and others. There's S-cops and others that don't police this kind of stuff.
We could limit it.
It's police and deputies, I think, is what we're aiming at. But yeah, but Mr. May, you come up with something and we'll. Yeah,
Could we
take it up.
ask Mr. May to maybe come up with something before this comes before rehab?
Yeah, why don't you look at it? We'll take it up tomorrow, okay?
Okay. I think we know where we're heading if
All right.
that's
All right.
the will of the committee.
Yeah, Mr. May, I think you know where to go. Yeah, so, okay. No, you're going to come up with some language for us to look at tomorrow, and we'll make it in full rehab, okay? So we have 7 minutes left. Any general comments from the public? What? We have 7 minutes, what?
Mr. Chair, I know there was some concern around the lines on 179, and I talked to council about it, and I think it's worth putting on the public record just to put people at ease, maybe. So on lines 173, where it says including marijuana, 172, 173, where it says including marijuana extraction or preparation by means of chemical synthesis, and I asked council if that would be legalizing kind of dangerous synthetic substances, like Delta 8. And so his response I thought is worth putting on the public record. So,
Mr. May, what's your thought about that?
Mr. Chair, Senator Van Valkenburg. Yeah, so what I was explaining was that, we would allow and we contemplate chemical synthesis occurring by a processor. I think one of the things that we found when we were critiquing our hemp allowances and putting, what a lot of people wanted to put the ban on Delta 8, what we found was that it wasn't really Delta 8 that was the problem. Delta 8 wasn't inherently bad. The issue was the process that they were using to make it, and they were using acid and other chemicals. They weren't properly extracting all of those chemicals. There were other contaminants found in these products. So what we're envisioning with this draft is that you could use isomerization process, like synthesis processes. You could manipulate the cannabinoids, but at the end of the day, you have to go through the testing. You can't have contaminants in there. You can't have anything that's bad. You can't have too much THC. The board is going to have a program to make sure every product is safe. And so we don't want to take away the ability to be creative, but there is a requirement that everything is safe. So the process could occur, but you're not going to have the same concerns that you had when the hemp companies were doing that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. May. So we need to take some just general final comments from the public. Why don't we set it at 5 minutes? Our caucus meeting starts in 5 minutes. So
Waited patiently.
yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Todd Gack on behalf of the Family Foundation. And we've listened to the retail side, we've listened to the regulatory, we've listened to the equity pieces of it. But I want to enter into the conversation two things that are related to the full committee, rehabilitation and social services. All right, so the rehabilitation oversight is to ensure that policies are in place, laws are in place to protect those who are suffering from addiction, to ensure that they're not lured into these shops that would exacerbate their addictions. A study out of Columbia in 2019 actually showed that when we commercialize marijuana, that the rates of addiction are 26% higher than those states that did not commercialize marijuana. The other piece of this is the piece of foster care. So we're talking about the social services side. And one of the responsibilities of this full committee is to look at the impact things have on the foster care system. And if you pass legislation to improve kinship care or funding or the efficiency of the agency, those are great and we support those. But if you take and commercialize marijuana and legalize it, you're going to make it difficult and put more stress on the foster care system, because now you're going to have, as we know, issue with drug use within the system where parents and children are both using and abusing the drugs. That's going to undermine the work that you're doing to fix the foster care system and to improve it. Two other points I want to make. One is the age. Can we have assurances that it stays at 21? At what point will there come a time when you say, well, let's lower it to 20? 19. Is there, when is someone going to come along and say that, these college students are really stressed out, and instead of putting them in a position where they could be getting into trouble, let's just lower the age. And the other point is the referendum, the local referendum. As I read the language, it says that it shall be prohibited, which says to me an opt-out. I would prefer an opt-in, because what you're doing is you're saying these localities have to allow these places, these establishments within their localities. We just had a discussion in another Senate committee yesterday, a debate over public housing and over undermining the rights of the local governments. This does that. Let's reverse it. Let's give the people a chance to say, hey, I don't want this in my community at all. The default should be it's not going there unless the people of the communities give it permission. With that, thank you for the time.
Hello, committee, and thank you again for hearing all of my comments. I have three. Number one, on page 12, when we talk about the Minority Small Business Liaison, I'd really like to include some type of evaluation and assessments that look directly at the continued enforcement as well as the market disparities. Right now, when we look at the hemp information, we're unable to see how diverse the hemp industry is because there's nothing in the code to bring that information forward. So actual annual reporting to look at how diverse the industry is. I'd also like to just talk about as well, something maybe small, but on page 22, when we're asking about the referendum, we would encourage the question to be, shall the operation of retail marijuana be allowed? That way, if people want it, it's a yes versus a no, and that might be confusing for voters. And the last piece is just to make sure that we did address the moral turpitude that we mentioned before about banning people. And in case you didn't hear, the most important part about this is to have assessments and evaluations for our market so we can see if we're actually including people. Otherwise, we're going to have to FOIA, and that information will not be available. Thank you.
Mr. Members of the committee, Greg Habib from Gentry Lock on behalf of the Virginia Cannabis Association. Thanks for all of your work. All of you did a lot of work on this bill before we got here, and the work done today, especially Mr. May as well. One specific point, we very strongly think it should be an opt-out provision, not an opt-in provision. We think that's important to make sure that we have the market set up diverse across the state. Otherwise, you're going to have a very piecemeal development of this program, which I think is bad for everybody in the market. But at a higher level, there are a lot of folks who don't like marijuana. There's a lot of folks that love marijuana. We understand that. Marijuana is legal. We're not going back. The question is very, very simple. Should we have illegal sales of untested, unregulated products sold by unlicensed drug dealers to children and to anybody they want to, or should we regulate those sales, tax them, license the sellers? This bill and today is a very good first step in creating that regulated market to reduce or eliminate the black market, to address the public safety and public health issues that we are facing. We appreciate your support and look forward to continuing to work with you on this bill as it goes forward. Thank you.
Mr. Habib, okay, no, we're done with you. You get two more. Okay, one more.
I'll be brief, Mr. Chairman. I think some of you have already heard from the Virginia Catholic Conference about this particular issue in the past, but for the benefit of Senator Van Valkenburg and Senator Rouse, who I don't know that we've had a chance to talk about this in the context of the Senate bills. I just wanted to say that, I think we all ought to just pause and take a breath about what we're doing here, because first, and I'll reiterate, my name's Tom and Torshow with the Virginia Catholic Conference. In the midst of what we're talking about here, there are some national issues in play, and one of them is that, for example, in the state of Maine, which legalized and commercialized a number of years ago, they are now having a very big problem with transnational criminal organizations. That is a legal commercial market. They have licensed outlets. They have licensed providers, the kinds of people that are trying to get in this business that are represented by 80% of the people in this room. They already have all that. They have the counters. They have all those industry structure set up. All that industry structure set up. They're having a huge problem with transnational criminal organizations. This is now being pursued by the Department of Homeland Security at the request of both of their U.S. senators, Senator Collins and Senator Angus King. And I'd like to flag that for you because they have found out in the review of those documents from the DHS that I-95 is the corridor for these TCOs, transnational criminal organizations, which are an amalgamation of the Chinese and the cartels. So I just need to bring that to your attention because crime goes up whether you have TCOs or not. If you look at Colorado, they have had exponential increases in crime. And I'm directing that particularly to all of you because all four of you represent major cities, major urban areas in Virginia. So if you look at Colorado, and I have a document I'll share with you electronically from the district attorney in Colorado, Mitch Morrissey, who is on record as writing a letter to the state of California saying, if you regulate cannabis, it does not reduce crime. It actually increases crime. And I will share that with you digitally. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you, and thanks for referencing Senator Angus King, who's a former City of Alexandria resident, graduate of UVA Law with my dad. All right, last comment.
I had comments in relation to access to Delta 8 and testing standards. Is this the appropriate time to talk about
Access
it?
to what?
Delta 8 and isomers of that nature?
If you can be quick, we're 3.5 minutes over the 5 minutes I allocated.
All right, I'll be fast. In regards to access to isomers, I do encourage and support access to those. When we first pulled Delta 8 from our inventory back in 2022, we found that our customers still preferred that in relation to accessing just straight THC, due to it being less intoxicating for them and easier to digest. So I do encourage allowing access, but with proper testing in place to ensure that there's no byproducts from production there. But on a note, in regards to testing standards, there are concerns around the full panel batch testing requirements. And to give you guys context, a full panel test costs a manufacturer anywhere from $450 to $800 per product, per SKU. So to implement that with every single batch that they make, and they make multiple a month, it is really excessive, and it could prohibit a lot of people from being able to operate in the space. So I would just like, any amendments in relation to those to be considered.
Thank you. Okay, just really quick, I thought the point of Ms. Higgs-Wise was well taken on the language of the referendum. Chair would entertain a motion on line 573 to change it from shall the operation of retail stores be prohibited to say, should adult use marijuana sales be allowed? Is there a motion for that?
Motion.
I mean, if you voted no, then it would be. Okay, skip it. Motion. I don't. We don't need the motion. So, having said that, okay, Senator Van Valkenburg has moved to recommend reporting the bill as amended and re-referring the bill to the Courts of Justice Committee.
Yes, after it comes to rehab and social services.
Right, that's why it's recommend reporting. We recommend it to the full committee, and then the full committee does the.
That's correct.
Right. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion about that? Okay, the clerk will call the roll.
Senator Van Valkenburg. Aye. Senator Rouse.
Aye.
Senator Reeves.
No by proxy.
Senator McDougal.
No by proxy.
Senator Surville.
Aye.
Senator Favola.
Aye.
Ayes 4, noes 2.
Great.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair Surville, and all the members who've served on the committee, and thank you to the audience for coming.
Yeah, and thank you for all the testimony today and all the expertise. We appreciate it. Committee's adjourned.